Shabbat Shalom. I know it's going to sound a little premature, but I've got a question. Where did Haman come from? Haman. Where did he come from? Amalek. All right, classic answer is he is the Agagite, which is connected to King Agag, who was the final king of the Amalekites that were attacked and destroyed during the days of King Saul. Great ancestral pedigree. It's one of the reasons why we read that section for Shabbat Zachor. We remind ourselves of the Amalekites and all that they did, and we fit Haman very neatly into that extended, hundreds and hundreds of year-long narrative of our struggle against the evil of the Amalekites. Great. But where did Haman come from? I don't mean what is his pedigree. How did he get to power? When does Haman first appear in the Megillah? Is he right there in chapter 1? No. Chapter 1 is the party scene with Vashti and all of that. Is he there in chapter 2? Nope. That's when Esther is being made queen. Where does he show up? Not until chapter 3. I tell you, it's bitterly disappointing for all the young people with their groggers ready to go that they have to wait through 2 relatively long chapters before they get to start swinging them madly at the mentioning of his name. But he just appears in that chapter. It's just, oh yeah, by the way, he's now number 2 of the entire Persian Empire, which, as we went over in chapter 1, is a pretty big deal. Wouldn't you expect the narrative to have mentioned him a little bit before he gets elevated to this status? Of course you would. And he was, at least according to the Midrashic reading. That is to say, not all is as it appears in the Megillah. Now, that shouldn't come as a surprise. There's a reason why we wear costumes during the holiday, to show that things are not always as they appear. But Haman actually makes a guest appearance in chapter 1 under a different name. Now, you might be thinking, oh, come on, Rabbi, we're not going to say that somebody has 2 different names. Really? What's Esther's name? Hadassah. She's got 2 names. Why can't Haman have 2 names? You might say, oh, but the text draws our attention to the fact that Esther has 2 names. True. How many names does Moses' father-in-law have? It's a bunch. It's a bunch. And the text never once sits us down and explains to us systematically what all of his names are. We just have to roll with it. So, Haman having 2 names, not such a big stretch at all. So his name in chapter 1 is Memuchan. Memuchan. Now, I will forgive you if you don't know that off the top of your head. He was the last of the advisors that was mentioned in the list, but he was the first to speak up when Ahasuerus is confused about what to do with Vashti. Let's do a little recap of that story. What is the problem with Vashti? Disobedience to the king. Right? Vashti was invited to come to the men's party when she was involved in the girls' party, and there are various interpretations of exactly what or how little Ahasuerus was asking her to wear when she came, and she refused. Ahasuerus is then beside himself with anger, but apparently his anger doesn't let him figure out what to do for himself, because he's only the emperor of all of Persia, and so he turns to his advisors. And Memuchan is the only advisor to speak up, although he's not the only one named. And his advice is, let Vashti no more come before the king, for she has disobeyed not only the king, but she will be leading a rebellion of women throughout the Persian Empire, who will now believe they do not have to do what their husband says. Let writers be sent out. Let letters be written in every language of your kingdom, declaring that men rule the house and women have to do as they're told, because she has not just disrespected the king. Mountain out of molehill, and also completely missing the point of what was the original offense. Memuchan is brilliant, and he is following the same pattern of behavior that we see when he is called Haman. So he is taking a minor incident. Yes, Vashti has refused to come before the king. But what is the actual offense there? Is it because she is disobeying her husband? No. As we know from other parts of the story, coming before the king was a big deal. And if you came at the wrong time, you could be killed. And if you didn't come when you were called, you could be killed. Haman himself later on is waiting, loitering in the courtyard, hoping to be invited in so that he can go speak to the king. He knows that this is a big deal because it's the king, not because it's her husband. But if he gives the advice, well, you know, she's disrespected the office of the king, and therefore she should be punished for that, then he's got no political hay to make. There's no room for him to grow his influence in Persia. He has to transform the subject from one of a narrow legal issue of what happens when you disobey the king's rule to show up into a broader gender-based issue that he can then find greater support throughout the rest of, especially the men, in the empire. You may be thinking, wait, they didn't have like gender arguments 3,000, 2,000 years ago. Oh, yes, they did. Absolutely. You read through not just the Persian chronicles, but the Greek chronicles, the Roman chronicles. People around the world have often worried that their empire is becoming effeminate, that it is becoming womanly. This has been a common trope of concern among those who seek to gain power and to restore some form of masculine glory to their empire that they fear they are losing. The Greeks made fun of the Persians because they were too womanly and effeminate. And anyone who's ever seen some of the fictionalized versions of that will know exactly how much that has continued to be perpetuated. And the Persians themselves complained about that themselves. So did the Romans, so did the Greeks, so did other empires throughout the world. That we are too soft, too womanly. So absolutely, this type of gender propaganda was an important part of the propaganda of ancient empires. And Memucan seizes this opportunity with Vashti to get himself raised to a higher visibility within the empire. The competition within the imperial court of Persia was fierce and cutthroat, as we know from the later assassination attempt mentioned in the Megillah and from historical records. And Memucan, also known as Haman, is using this opportunity to raise his political visibility, to get known by other people as being a strong man, a strong guy, somebody who will ensure that there will be a masculine, virile Persian empire. And we see this exact same idea come when he is confronted by Mordecai. What is Mordecai's offense? He didn't bow down to Haman. He didn't bow down to Haman. What is the technical offense? He's not following the king's decree. The king said people should bow down to Haman because Haman's number 2 in the entire empire. Mordecai doesn't. And what is Haman's response to that? Kill all the Jews. I'm sorry, the same way that you thought the response to the queen making an infraction with the king's law needed to be exiled or executed, depending upon how you read it, and you also had to put in an entire layer of gender war on top of this in order to make the most out of this political opportunity. So too, when Mordecai commits an infraction against the king's policy, you can't just leave it as Mordecai should be punished. No, there is more political opportunity to be exploited here, because you can not only attack the Jews, but you can seize their property and enrich yourself in the process. You can commit genocide and get rich. It's a win-win situation, except for the dead. Haman is not one to waste a good opportunity to do something that is completely off scale from what the actual situation calls for. So Memucan and Haman are very likely to be the same person. It is definitely the same MO. And we have to ask, why do people fall for it? After all, Ahasuerus, he's a little bit kind of weak and soft, but he goes along with it. And the people are a little startled with the whole kill all the Jews, but they go along with it. Well, they're not sure what they can do. They're not sure what they should do. They're not sure whether Haman might have a point. And Memucan, well, at least half the population likes the fact that there is now a law telling them that they are the king of their own castle. And so they permit these things to be done, even though there is a hint that this seems a little bit of political opportunism. But the last laugh, and there are many laughs in the Megillah, the last laugh comes from, of course, the conclusion. What is Haman's final fate? Hoisted on his own petard. And I don't just mean literally hoisted up on the impalement stake that he had put aside for Mordechai. That happened too, of course. But who is it that ultimately casts Haman down? A woman, Esther. She is the one who casts him down, not Mordechai. Mordechai helps and inspires her, of course, but ultimately it is her bravery to break the king's rule and go see him without being invited that leads to Haman's downfall. And why is Esther there at all? Why is she queen? Because Memucan got rid of Vashti. If he had not spoken up and used that opportunity to aggrandize himself through his gender policies, if he had not gotten rid of Vashti at that point, Esther never would have been sitting next to the king to be in a position to stand up for her people and drive him out of his conspiracy and out of the government and into the grave. He set in motion with his own political rise exactly what would be necessary to bring him down. It is beautiful literature. It's one of the reasons I absolutely adore the book of Esther, because it is written so beautifully, and yet we often play it off as though the entire thing were a joke. Esther ends up at the end the exact opposite of what Memucan, also known as Haman, was preaching was the ideal for women. She ends up strong. She ends up commanding. She ends up giving the orders and instructions. She is not some meek trad wife that is sitting behind her husband, clutching behind his coattails, letting him be the public face. She's the one that others are falling down afraid of, including Haman himself, who cowers before her when he finally realizes what's about to happen. It is in a most amazing, delicious sense of irony. And it is one of the most Jewish books, because it says that those who have been cast as being the least can rise to be the most. Just like the Jews, cast aside, thrown aside by every empire in front of us, can eventually rise and be strong and have our own place in this world, a place from strength, not from meekness or cowardice. And those who seek to cast others in those roles may find out that they are going to be stronger than expected, and may find out that the very policies that they are implementing to try and degrade, exploit, and harm others will come back to bite them just like they came back to bite Haman. There's a simple idea in the concept of Purim. When there's a problem, fix the problem. Don't try and make more of it than it is. Don't try and use it for personal opportunity and aggrandizement. Don't try and use it to make money out of. That was what Haman did. Instead, Mordechai and Esther, they come up with a policy. Let us fight back. That's it. They don't say, let us hunt down and kill, let us be in control of the entire thing. They don't say, let women be in charge of men. They don't try to monopolize this moment as being their own personal opportunity for reshaping the Persian Empire. Instead, they are constrained. There's a problem, Haman. There's a solution, fight back. That's enough. This is the measure that Megillah gives us for how we confront issues such as this. You'll notice that the Jews do not only aggrandize themselves, but also don't enrich themselves in their retaliation against Haman and his cronies. It is a surgical response. The story of Purim is much more complicated than just this, and there are many more lessons to learn from it. And we've got about a month and a half now before the holiday actually comes. If you only ever open the Megillah when you come for the reading, I will plead with you, open it up this afternoon. Read through it with a critical eye that this is not a kid's story. This is not a funny story. There is humor in it. There is irony in it. There is satire in it. But there are so many insights for not just understanding the past, but understanding the present. Shabbat Shalom.